Raise your hand if you feel like you're ready to start investing, but you have absolutely no idea where to begin. Maybe you write, figure out how to invest on your to-do list, and it feels like this big gray blob of uncertainty that just keeps floating over your head, so you just push it further and further down the line.
We've been there too, feeling the nudge to start, but having absolutely no idea how to do the thing. That's why we decided to record this episode, so you know exactly where and how to start.
And before we get into this, we also want to mention that we have a few other episodes on investing. One in particular is episode 67 on why you may not feel ready to invest, even if you technically are ready. So if you're curious about starting to invest and you feel like a beginner, but you also feel like maybe you're not sure if you're ready or not, I highly recommend going back and listening to that episode first or after this one.
Welcome to the Finance Girlies, a podcast for millennial and Gen Z women who are curious about money but have never quite felt at home in traditional finance spaces.
We are Emily Backdorf and Cassidy Horton, podcast hosts, longtime friends, and finance writers for brands like AOL and Yahoo Finance.
Rather than giving you prescriptive advice, we talk about money the way friends actually do, with stories, questions, and a lot of figuring it out in real time.
So when you start investing, there are two overarching questions you'll need to answer. And the first one is, what type of account are you going to open? And then the second one is, what are you going to do with the money once it's inside of that account? AKA, how will you invest that money? So we're going to walk through both of those now.
Yeah, so starting with the type of account. So when we talk about investing, we often describe the type of account as like a bucket and the investments that you buy as what you put into that bucket. So right now we're just talking about the bucket. If you were to look up like how to invest, where do I invest first, you'll probably see different financial experts give you some sort of order of operations. And basically that's because there are certain buckets or types of investment accounts that give you more advantages than others. So we have kind of taken some of the classic advice and our own experience and created our own order of operations. This isn't something you have to follow to the T, but it is a good outline for getting started. So pretty much every personal finance expert would probably argue that if you have access to a company-sponsored retirement plan that gives you a match, that you should start there. So, for example, if you work for a company that offers a 401k and they match dollar for dollar, say up to 3% of your salary, if you contribute 3% of your salary, they will give you another 3% of your salary and fund your 401k as well. So essentially, you are investing 6% of your salary, but you're only contributing half of that. With this being the first bucket, contribute enough to get the full employer match because that is essentially free money. You may not max out your entire 401k. The limit on 401ks is pretty high in 2026. The limit is $24,500, but just get that match first. And then you can always, if you have extra money later on after we get through the next few buckets, you can always return and contribute more.
Yeah, the next bucket that you'll maybe want to start with is a health savings account, which is an HSA if you have the option to open one. HSAs are usually available to you if you have a high deductible healthcare plan, and you can check your health insurance documents to see if you have this type of plan or not. But if you do, HSAs are awesome. They are super advantageous because you get a triple tax advantage. So what we mean by that is any money that you contribute into that account reduces your taxable income for the year. Any interest or growth that money has while it's inside of your account gets to grow tax-free. So you're not taxed on that money either as it grows. And then you can use that money tax-free to pay for any qualified medical expenses at any point in time while you have the account open. So you truly pay no taxes on the money inside of that account, which to our knowledge is one of the only accounts that has those advantages. Last week's episode was actually on HSA, so you can go back and give that a listen if you want more information on how those accounts work. But essentially, the money that you have inside of that account, you can keep it in what's similar to like a checking account portion where it doesn't really grow any interest, but you can use the debit card that comes with it to pay for medical expenses anytime you have them. Or you can invest that money too and let it grow just like you would any other retirement account or investment account. So Emily and I both have HSAs, and we both keep a small portion in like the checking account part of the account, and then we invest the rest of it to let it grow. So that is another bucket that you can fill up.
The next investment bucket that we recommend moving on to after you fill up the first two is a individual retirement account, so an IRA. There are two types of IRAs, traditional and Roth, and they both have the same contribution limits, so that's $7,500 in 2026 if you're under the age of 50, and anyone with earned income can open one of these accounts. So deciding whether to open a Roth or a traditional IRA is something I think a lot of people can get stuck on. And I guess before we get into this, quick little primer on the difference. With a Roth IRA, you are contributing after-tax income, but when you retire, you can withdraw the money tax-free. With a traditional IRA, it's the opposite. So you are contributing pre-tax income, but you are taxed on withdrawals in retirement. So there's a lot of advice out there for younger people to go with the Roth because the logic is you're earning less now. And if you expect to be in a higher tax bracket later on, you're getting the taxes kind of out of the way now, and you'll be able to withdraw that money tax-free later. But there are arguments for both, and we actually have an entire episode on choosing a Roth versus traditional IRA. It's episode 72 with Sean Mullaney. I think the kind of biggest takeaway here is at the end of the day, it probably doesn't matter that much, at least in our opinion, if you are putting off investing because you can't decide between a Roth or a traditional IRA, you're better off just picking one and going with it. And maybe it wasn't the best decision, but it was still a really good decision. So that is the third bucket.
And just for reference, I have personally flip-flopped between the two a bunch over the years. I originally started investing in a traditional IRA, and then everyone was like, you should invest in a Roth. So I was like, sure. And then I did that for a few years, and I went back to a traditional IRA. So it doesn't matter.
And you can have both, but that contribution limit is for both accounts. So if you contribute $7,500 to your Roth IRA in 2026, you can't contribute at all to a traditional. So keep that in mind.
It's going to be $7,500 in total across both accounts. Okay, so once you filled up your IRA bucket, and if you still have money to invest and you're still rocking and rolling, then you can go ahead and max out the rest of your 401k for the year to finish getting that tax deduction for this tax year. So This is what Emily was talking about earlier, where it's like if you've gotten your employer match and then you've maxed out your HSA for the year, if you have the option to invest in one, and then you've maxed out your Roth or traditional IRA for the year and you still have money left over, that's when you can then begin maxing out your 401k as kind of the fourth step.
And for the fifth bucket, this is just a taxable brokerage account. So there's no special tax advantages, which is why it's kind of at the bottom of our list. However, there are a few things to keep in mind. So if you have any other like major goals before retirement, or you want to retire early, you might actually bump up a taxable brokerage account in your priority list and make this a higher ranked bucket, so to speak. That is because with a brokerage account, because you're not getting those tax advantages, you can withdraw money without penalty at any time. That said, you should still generally treat your brokerage account and the investments in it as a long-term strategy, but this just gives you a little bit more flexibility than those other retirement-specific accounts because it doesn't penalize you for early withdrawals.
And just for some context here, I do have an individual brokerage account. Do you have one, Emily?
I don't know if we ever opened one.
Okay.
It's a line item in our budget. Okay. But I don't know. I think we just directed everything to our HSA and said we'll do that later.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, there was a time many years ago where I was like, maybe I'll want to buy a house. I'm not in any rush. This could be like a 5 to 10 year into the future thing. And then I was like, maybe I do want to retire early and kind of like chase the FIRE movement pretty aggressively. I wasn't sure. So, and I also didn't have access to a workplace 401k at all. So I would, max out my IRA and then I would go straight to a brokerage account and put more money in there. But I shifted that strategy back, just over time as I learned more information and my situation changed and I realized I'm perfectly fine with renting and I could potentially be fine with a traditional retirement age. So anyway, now I also have a solo 401k now, so I max that out instead.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think I'm the opposite. Like, I remember when I first started investing, wondering like, should I open one of these? And ultimately, I think I got the advice that like, get the tax advantages, like max out those accounts while you're young. But now, and this is like what, 9-10 years later, it would be really nice to have put some like savings, but like long-term savings into a brokerage account to have for bigger purchases. So
yeah.
Hindsight is 2020, but if you're like in the weeds of debating whether or not to funnel money into a brokerage account or another type of investment account, you're probably doing a lot right already, so don't stress too much about it.
Yeah. I also think like if you were to this point in the episode where you feel like your head is swimming with like all the account options that you can choose from and like what to do and you feel a little bit confused, I also think that especially after talking to Sean Mullaney where we did episode 72, like Emily and I both came to the conclusion, and you can back me up on this, Emily, of just like investing for retirement period is good. So don't delay starting just because you are like struggling to figure out what type of account to do and how to do it. And you want to like optimize it perfectly. Just start. And it doesn't matter if that's starting with a workplace plan that you already have access to, or maybe an IRA that's really easy to open. Maybe you already have access to one. Like whatever it is, just start where it feels easiest, because starting is better than delaying, because you're struggling to choose the perfect strategy.
Agreed. I think that's like the best thing I did for myself was to start, because I did have these questions, but ultimately I put the money somewhere and it will benefit me in the long run. And I'm so glad I started when I did, even if I didn't necessarily make all the right, all the perfect decisions. So.
Yeah. And you can always adjust your strategy. Like there are years where you might open a Roth IRA and you only invest in there, and then you learn a little bit more and you get used to it and you get more comfortable and you're like, okay, now that I know a little bit more, I'm actually going to adjust and maybe save for retirement in these accounts as well. So like it is fine, but the fact is you still spent that year investing and saving for future you in some capacity, and that's great. So all right, so now that we've talked about what types of accounts you can invest in as a beginner, let's talk about what you can actually invest in inside of those accounts as a beginner. And I will start off by saying that choosing and opening your account is arguably the hardest part. And once you cross that bridge, you'll naturally be hit with the next question is like, what do I do with this money once it's inside of the account? What should I actually invest in, and what does that mean? And so once you put your money into your investment account, you will need to actually invest it. Simply moving the money into the bucket, so to speak, doesn't mean that it's actually invested in anything. It actually just sits there as cash, essentially, until you go into that bucket, aka you go into that account online and you choose to use that money to purchase something. So keep that in mind as well. You can think of what you invest in as you choosing what to fill your bucket up with. And so for the most part, a lot of your options for what you can actually invest in look the same once you're inside of the account. So for the most part, it doesn't really matter if you choose a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA, or you want to invest inside an HSA or your 401k, whatever. By and large, you'll see a lot of the same investment options inside of all of those accounts. It's just the tax advantages that you're getting with each of them that kind of varies. So we're going to walk you through a few options now of what you can invest in.
Yeah, so I can start with my strategy, which is something called a target date retirement fund. And this is if you want the path of least resistance. This is like the absolute easiest way to go. So a target date fund is a mutual fund that is based on your rough retirement year, and it automatically rebalances over time to balance growth and risk with your retirement timeline. So what that means is if you go to a financial advisor to get advice on your investments, they're going to tell you to rebalance your portfolio as you get closer to retirement to make your portfolio less risky and more stable as you age. And that's because the closer you get to retirement, the fewer ups and downs and swings you want to see in your portfolio because you're getting closer and closer to needing that money. So a target date retirement fund actually does that rebalancing for you. So truly all you have to do is buy the fund once. If you set up automatic contributions, you don't need to go in and buy the fund every time you invest. Choose your fund and then just let it go. And this is exactly what I do. I invest using, I think what I invest in is Vanguard's 2060 fund, and that ticker is VTTSX. And they have funds for every 5-year increment. So 2060, 2065, 2070. And you can find these mutual funds at any brokerage, not just Vanguard. And they're just a really easy, beginner-friendly, and effective way to invest. What I would recommend for people who are just struggling to start.
Mm-hmm. And I will say before I go into my strategy next that if I could go back in time, I would probably just do Emily's strategy because it feels so much simpler. And, you don't have to worry about piecemealing anything together whatsoever. You just pick one fund. So whenever you go to purchase it, it almost looks like you're just putting all of your money into one stock, so to speak. But it's not just one stock. It's like a basket of well-diversified stocks, bonds, whatever else is in there. It's the total. It's a one and done, total and complete package. So it's just really, really easy. My situation is still touted as being very easy, but it's a little more hands-on. And so I actually, instead of investing all of my money into one target date fund that rebalances automatically, I have my money invested across 2 to 3 index funds or exchange traded funds. And those are still well diversified baskets of stocks and bonds. But one ETF that I invest in is just the S&P 500. So it's the 500 biggest publicly traded companies right now in that fund. That is all of my one index fund. And then I have another one that's bonds, kind of a similar setup. And the reason why I originally set that up is because I was in my 20s when I started investing, and I knew that I wouldn't need this money ideally until retirement. I wanted to be even a little more aggressive or have the option to take on a little more risk than what maybe a target date fund would allow. So that's why I chose that kind of setup, but it's still very set it and forget it. Instead of dumping all of my money into just one target date fund, I do have to log in once a month and be I've got $1,000. I want to put 600 of it into this ETF and the other 400 of it into this other ETF. So I have to manually decide how I'm going to split up however much money I transfer into it. So it's just slightly more hands-on, but it's still very diversified. And some examples of ETFs, and some of these are the ones that I invest in, are VOO, VTI, and VUG. Those are all very popular ETFs. Emily, I have a question that I'm going to pose to you.
Okay.
If you were a complete beginner, you were back at the very beginning, had never invested before, and you were ready to start, what would you do? What would be your strategy? Let me also caveat this by saying that your situation is exactly like it is now. So you are self-employed and you have access to a high deductible. You have access to an HSA because I know you also have a high deductible health insurance plan. So your situation is exactly the same, but you've never invested. How would you do it?
So it's today. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think I would max out the HSA first. So I would open an HSA, which is really easy to do if you listen to our last episode. If I had enough cash, I would max that out for the year. Then I would go on to probably a traditional IRA and max that out. And I know we didn't get into additional options for self-employed people, but I think we've mentioned in previous episodes that you and I have access to other types of IRAs because we are self-employed. So I would probably split the difference, I guess. With any money that's left over, I would put some into my self-employed IRA and some into a brokerage account, actually.
Okay.
I think that's what I would do. And I would, once again, I think I would just go with target date funds for any retirement accounts. And then for the brokerage, probably go with your approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds good.
What would you do?
If I was starting today, because I also have a high deductible health insurance plan, I would max out my HSA, which is actually this is actually my approach for this year. I feel like in some ways I kind of view whatever my investment approach is for the year based on what I think my income is going to be and like how much extra income I think I'm going to have to invest. And so this year specifically, so far I've only been working on maxing out my HSA, and I've officially done that. So my HSA is maxed out. And now any other money that I want to invest in for retirement, I do have a self-employed retirement plan. So I would just put any extra money directly into that self-employed retirement plan. And then if I maxed it out and still had extra money, I would probably do like a traditional IRA next. But if I could go back in time, I would just do target date funds for everything that I could do target date funds for and just keep that really easy.
Okay, so to recap, if you are ready to start investing, but you're wondering where to start, if you have an employer-sponsored plan with a match, start there. Otherwise, if you have access to an HSA, that's another good place to start. Then you can move into a Roth or traditional IRA, the rest of your 401k. And if you want to be saving for goals that will happen before full retirement age, then we also recommend opening a brokerage account.
And then as for what you put inside of that account, truly the easiest thing to do is just to pick a target date fund that aligns with the rough year that you plan on retiring. Usually target date funds you can just buy in 5-year increments, but I would do that. And if you want to be a little more hands-on, you can invest in 2 to 3 index funds or ETFs and call it a day.
Yeah. And if after listening to this episode, you are wondering how much money you need to invest, that's kind of a next natural question. Check out episode 85, where we ask and answer the question, is investing $100 a week enough to retire?
It's a really good episode. We break down a lot of math on how much you could have if you invested $100 a week for different periods of time, and how to figure out how much you need for retirement to live comfortably. It's a really, really good episode, so highly recommend it. But with that, we will see you next week. Love you. Bye.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Finance Girlies podcast. Nothing in this episode is meant to be taken as financial advice.
Please do your own research and talk to a professional if you need advice. If you liked this episode, consider leaving a review. Better yet, send the show to a friend who might enjoy it too. Love ya. Bye.
Nailed it.